everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 13 of season 3 of Revise and Resubmit. I'm Dr. Kim Bissell, the Southern Progress Endowed Professor in Magazine Journalism and the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Communication and Information Sciences at the University of Alabama.
And I'm Dr. Annalisa Boland, an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Studies, also at the University of Alabama. And we both work in the Institute for Communication and Information Research, or the ICIR, at UA. And, one of the things about hosting this podcast is like we prepare for the guests each week. We do that. We do a little research about their backgrounds and the research they're doing. And then I feel like we barely scratch the surface in each episode. Like, often that's because our guests have an answer and both of us are like, oh, yes, that's cool. I have 1,000,002 followers. And then we go down these paths chasing rabbits unintended. But, that's kind of like research, huh?
You're absolutely right. And we have to encourage our listeners to take a look at the show notes for each episode because we add a lot of information there that we never get to in the actual episode. And then we further encourage folks to look up and read our guest articles and books, and we try to provide links for those in the show notes as well. Research, even academic journal articles, can be really interesting when the topic is interesting.
And I think that is a good segue into today's conversation with Dr. Lindsay Conlon Maxwell. She studies FOMO, or fear of missing out, among other things. And because I am high on FOMO, I now feel FOMO with respect to researching FOMO.
And not to have too much of a spoiler alert, but in today's episode, you'll hear all about FOMO and how it relates to binge watching, two things I do pretty well. One note that we want to put out there before we welcome our guests is that we had a couple of moments of disruption while recording this episode with weather alerts and static. We get monthly weather alerts and they just happen to be blowing up when we were recording, but it doesn't disrupt from what you learn from our guest. And before you all start feeling some FOMO about this conversation, we're going to get it going and give a very warm welcome to Dr. Lindsay Conlon Maxwell, an associate professor of communication at the University of Southern Mississippi. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lindsay. We are thrilled to be able to catch up with you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, Lindsay, I know some of your research has studied a topic that really fascinates me, FOMO, or fear of missing out.
Yes.
And I know you studied it in an entertainment context. But to kind of ease ourselves into this whole conversation today, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more, just purely observational, about how you see FOMO playing out with social media, or if you see it happening, and what platforms that you might consider to be a little worse than others. And we're going to talk about your research on that a little bit later.
Sure thing. So I think FOMO is like the most interesting thing and affects everything. And maybe it's just because I am high in FOMO. And so when I see people post about, oh, I watched Squid Game, I watched whatever, I'm like, oh my gosh, now I have to do it too, like, because I want to be part of it. And so I think, especially for, people like me, high FOMO people, it drives everything that you do, and it drives all of your media consumption, or at least it does for me, because I just want to be in and I want to know what people are talking about and like be able to understand the memes and stuff. So I think FOMO is like such a big part of why we do what we do in terms of media.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that I have like 500 follow-up questions because but before we get to that, I do want to ask you a little bit about who you are and what you do. So we're going to transition into this rapid fire section. And to kick us off, where are you from, or where did you grow up?
So I am from British Columbia, which is in Western Canada. and my whole family moved to Louisiana when I was in high school. And so I'm kind of a split where am I from person. You could call it Canada, you could call it Louisiana, whichever way you look at it. Um, and right now I live in Mississippi. I'm at the University of Southern Mississippi.
So do
Nice.
you have a dual citizenship, Canadian and US?
Yes. Yes, I am a
Oh,
citizen of both countries. Yep.
cool.
And when were you at the University of Alabama?
Between 2012 and 2015, I was a PhD student there. My PhD is from communication and information sciences.
And how long have you been in Mississippi?
Since I graduated. So I moved directly from Tuscaloosa to Hattiesburg, and I've been here ever since. So about 6.5 years.
Perfect.
So what did the young Lindsay think she would be doing when she grew up? Was it always, I want to be a professor, or not so much?
No, I don't think so. Like, I think about this a lot because people talk about what they wanted to be when they grow up, and I don't know if young Lindsay ever had a plan really. I don't know. Like, when I think back, I remember thinking, "Oh, I want to be a chef. I want to be a vet." Like, there was never a real, um, you know, clear, concise path in young Lindsay's head. And so I think I just kind of fell into it. And I didn't really think about becoming a professor probably until I was in my master's program. And then I was like, well, I might as well just do a PhD now at this point. And then I became a professor because what else are you going to do with your PhD? So,
I find that actually very, very funny because so many of our previous guests have said, like, oh, I wanted to play in the NBA or the NFL. You know, they had these aspirations to
yeah,
be pro athletes. And then some point relatively early on, it's like, well, that's not panning out.
right,
So
right.
what else can I do?
Exactly.
So shifting into the more than 500 follow-up questions that Annalise and I both have, let's get a little bit into the scholarship that you're doing. Are you able to give us an elevator pitch on your research?
Yes. So my main area is, as you said, is the entertainment stuff. And think of it like coming from the audience perspective is what I do. There's lots of other research that looks at like why a TV show is good to binge. And I look at it from, well, why does the audience want to binge? And so I do a lot of binge watching, a lot of FOMO, which to me they tie together because I think, and my research shows, FOMO makes you binge watch. FOMO makes you go to the movies. FOMO makes you watch all the stuff that other people are watching and do the stuff other people are doing. And so my elevator pitch is entertainment consumption, why we do it, and considering everything from the perspective of the audience.
Okay, even more follow-up questions.
Okay, I'm ready.
So first, let's back up before we get into the follow up. Can you give us one or a headline from one of your more interesting findings?
Oh, yeah, I think one of my headline, that FOMO makes you more likely to want to watch a show that's already in progress. Um, because of, like, I've been calling it, social media is the new water cooler. Because we see other people talking about something, we will binge watch to catch up to whatever it is. And that's not just like shows that are on Netflix, it's like currently airing things. So God, I don't know, I can't think of a good example. Like, whatever show on NBC, I love it. Like, your FOMO will make you do that binge catch up. I think that was one of my kind of favorite interesting finding. It's not just that we want to binge watch or consume streaming stuff, but that we will binge watch to get to where other people are in real time.
And like that happened. I mean, so a confession. During the pandemic, when I saw on social media there were these. It was like a tortilla hack where
Mhm.
I put 4 different things on a tortilla and then like folded them all
Yes.
up.
I
And
saw that too, yeah.
I was like, okay, so I did it. It didn't work. Like, but, and I was like, I have to do this now. And
Yeah.
there was some coffee thing. I bought all the ingredients to do it because I don't know why, but I like, so I was influenced, and it was really because I think, like you said, like I was fearful of missing out on the experience. And what if somebody started talking about it? I didn't want to be like, oh,
Yes.
I don't know
I
what you're
don't
talking
know what that is. Yeah, I know. That's
about.
your FOMO talking.
I'm FOMO talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to follow up on this notion that FOMO leads directly to binge watching, because I think to a degree, there's been a lot of talk about Squid Games, and it's number one or two or something on Netflix. But then I've also had friends who know me pretty well say, mm, I might recommend you not watch it. And so I've had no interest. But then when other things come up, I feel like I'm binge watching because it helps me like remember the details of the show, you know what I mean?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so when I watch it back to back to back, then it's even more exciting and entertaining because I
Thank you.
know how it just ended. So I'm like,
Yes.
well, what's
Yes.
gonna happen?
Yes. So I, one of my papers that just came out, which is my, ironically, weirdly, the very first solo author paper I ever got published, because I just like to write with other people. But it's about spoilers and like, why do we avoid spoilers? Because we don't want to know, and it all has to do with exactly what you're talking about. Like, we want that suspense, we want the enjoyment. Binge watching makes it
Mm-hmm.
better, and
Mm-hmm.
avoiding spoilers is what we do. And so, yeah, it's all in there. It all ties together.
So how did you get started doing the research that you're doing now?
It honestly is all the way back from my PhD program, because I can't remember, like, I think one of my other classmates was like, "Oh, somebody should do a study about binge watching." And I was like, "Ding, ding, ding, ding." And then I did that, and I did my dissertation about it, and I just never stopped. Like, it literally was just from one kind of comment, offhand comment of, somebody should do this, and it just is so interesting to me, and so, like, getting into why we watch entertainment, because we spend so much of our time doing entertainment consumption, and it's fun, right? Like, it is fun to research binge watching and FOMO and movies, and I don't know, I really like it, but it's been there the whole time.
Well, I really feel like, I mean, you're hitting on something that is so like with the times, you know what I mean? The
Mhm.
concept of FOMO, the concept of binge watching, even and maybe I just don't remember this, but even 5, 6, 7 years ago, I heard about binge watching, and I think some people did it, but we didn't really have as many options to binge watch. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so I think as all of the different networks and streaming, all of that's opened up, we like now I can watch an entire season of the Great British Baking Show in a weekend, and
Yes.
it's super exciting.
Yep. Yeah, totally. I mean, there is still a lot, like, you're touching on it. There's a lot of discussion in the binge watching literature about what is binge watching, because it didn't exist, or at least I argue it didn't exist how it does now until exactly what you said, 6 7 years ago. Before that, we had marathons, right? Like,
Yes, yes.
we could watch, whatever HGTV had on that weekend, but the audience wasn't in control in the same way that we are now. And so that's kind of like the crux of my argument about binge watching, is that it's all about the control. Like, if you can control the pace of the narrative and watch as little or as much as you want to, that is what makes it better. It's that the audience gets to pick it. right? And do whatever you want. Like
Mhm.
maybe I don't want to watch 9 hours of the Great British Baking Show. Maybe I want to watch 3, and that's fine too. And that's what binge watching is. And so I argue against some of the other researchers out there. I argue it's the control that like makes binge watching binge watching.
Okay, so I have a question here, and as I think as a high FOMO score
Same,
and
same. Yep.
a bit bigger, although I love spoilers because it lowers my anxiety. But that's a whole different conversation. Should we lean into this? Like, is it okay to experience FOMO and to go like
Yes.
spend my weekend binging?
Yes, I argue yes. So again, I think I'm kind of on the outs of what some entertainment researchers do, because there is a lot of binge watching literature that talks about it's a negative thing and kind of tie it into like binge drinking or binge eating, where it's this negative behavior. And my argument is it's no different than reading a book in one sitting. Like we don't have cultural shame about reading books, but we do
Right,
about binge watching.
right.
It's not different. It's narrative consumption. So I think yes. And I had a study which you will understand it didn't get published because it was a negative result. But I
Mm.
did a study about guilty pleasure, like measured guilt, measured self control, measured binge watching, like a couple things like that. And there was no link, which is why it couldn't get published, right? Like I found nothing, but I found no link between guilt and binge watching. Like you shouldn't feel guilty. Nobody else is feeling guilty. It's just what we do and it's fine. That's what I think anyway. So,
Well, I'm going to cite that unpublished study.
well, it went to a conference at least, so that's something. But
Perfect. Well, I'm going to use that
yeah,
for and plans.
there you go. There you
Okay.
go.
So, Lindsay, tell me, just based on your research, I'm trying to validate my own media consumption
Go
behavior.
ahead. Yeah.
I would argue that the way I consume media via binge watching makes it more efficient. Like, not even including scrolling through the ads, but if I want to watch 2 episodes of whatever it is, I can get it done and then like be off doing other things. And I think that's how I justify what I do. It's like, well, I'm spending less time because I'm running it back to back and not scrolling it for other things to watch. Am I crazy with this? Like, you've talked about you're studying this from an audience perspective. So what are you learning about all the different ways audiences binge, and then and you've hit on this, but how it ties to FOMO?
I'm learning that everybody loves binge watching. A big problem that I have very often, like my dependent variable will be enjoyment, right? Like the outcome of consumption is always going to be enjoyment. It is never normally distributed because everybody puts strongly agree, strongly agree, strongly agree for enjoyment. And so I always end up having to like break it down and make it categorical, because everyone that responds to all my surveys and everything, they all say strongly enjoy it. So what am I learning is that everybody loves binge watching. Everybody has FOMO, and yeah, it kind of, yeah.
So
Don't
you're
feel
either
alone. It's
yes or
everyone.
no.
Yeah, exactly.
You've touched on this, but how are or what methods do you use to collect data? Is it
I
only
am. It's largely survey. Yeah, all my entertainment stuff is survey. Yeah, I haven't done I've done content analysis and experiments recently, but it's mostly like when a grad student wants to do something and it's their work. And so I still dabble in those things, but largely surveys. And I love kind of playing with what Qualtrics can do. Like, for example, I learned how to do piped text in Qualtrics. And so I had people type in what's your favorite show that you're watching right now, and then the piped text, so whatever their response was ended up in every single other question on the survey. Not every single one,
Oh,
but like,
that's fancy.
so that was for the spoiler thing. And Annalisa, this is like, you gave a perfect example, is that you love spoilers. Okay. And so I found this other research out there that says exactly what you say. People love spoilers. And I was like, but I don't love spoilers. Like, I don't want my favorite show to be spoiled. And so my study was, instead of doing it an experiment where you kind of introduce people to a short story, and well, then of course they're going to love spoilers because they're in an experimental setting. Of course they want to know how it ends because they want to be out of the experiment. But I used the pipe text to talk about favorite show, and I found the exact opposite of the previous literature, is that when you are talking about someone's favorite show, they don't want spoilers. But if it's something that they're not invested in, they do want spoilers. And that spoilers will get you into something, right? Like, if you're getting a tidbit of a spoiler here or there, it'll make you want to watch something. But if you're already invested, you don't want the spoilers anymore. So that's kind of, where my survey, my tricky use of Qualtrics kind of helped me get at that I don't think you can get outside of a survey, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, it totally makes sense. So I want to shift gears on you just a little bit, and I'm so curious to know if the research you do makes it into your classes. And then, kind of as a second question, and you can reverse the order, tell us a little bit about the classes that you teach. I guess that's the better question. Tell us about the classes you teach and if your research makes it into your classes.
Okay, good question. So I teach, kind of like, think of it like three things. The biggest thing is I teach broadcast journalism, and so it kind of makes it in there, but we're mostly talking about journalism stuff, and so it doesn't, like, my entertainment spoilers stuff doesn't exactly apply. But I also very often teach our intro class, our 101 class, which I love doing it and no one else does. So it's fine. I'm like, I'll take it, because then I'm like, hello, freshmen who are 19 and love TikTok. Let's talk about binge watching. And then they're into it. So they love it. And I talk to them about it. And then when I teach grad classes, which is kind of the third part, um, yeah, there's tons of research. I make them read my stuff and then kind of preface it like, I'm not this vain. I just know how to explain it better when it was me that did it. So, yeah, my research does creep in every area. Yeah.
So, do you have a background in broadcast journalism professionally before you got into the PhD program and then went off to teach?
Yes. Yeah. In between when I was an undergrad and before I started my master's program, I worked at a group of radio stations. And so I worked at a couple different of them, but mainly I worked writing for the afternoon drive radio show. And so I was the producer for the, news show that aired after Sean Hannity every single day for a couple of years. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was a local radio station. Your reactions made it sound like it was way more important than it was. But yeah, I was a radio producer for a couple years.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So, do you go back to what you said, and teaching freshmen also, but how does do we as consumers also have kind of the to others to have FOMO and then to watch? I'm not testing my own like influence, but how does all of that kind of work? Or
Yeah, I think it all works together. I think we definitely have the power, like, through social media, to shape others, right? Like, because if I post, I watched Squid Game, then someone else is going to get my FOMO, right? So I don't know if we have the power to give other, like, I think of FOMO like a trait, right? And so I don't
Mm,
know if we can influence that trait within people. We can definitely trigger somebody's FOMO by posting on social media or talking about it, because then we become the ones that are making other people want to, not miss out.
mm.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if
Okay,
it's
so
a bummer or
I
not.
want to shift. I'm gonna shift gears on you one more time. But I think this is an important question for everybody who's tuning in and listening. I'm assuming that maybe you've got a pending deadline of this Friday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, maybe that you're working towards. It's something that we've heard so many other guests talk about. But in general, when you think about deadlines and trying to balance all the things you have going on between teaching and research and service and everything else outside of that, what is it that keeps you motivated? I mean, it can get down it sometimes. I think it can be really hard to like push through and find the motivation when it's like, oh, I got to do this and this and this. So, what works for you, and what advice can you give our listeners who may be a little bit newer to academia?
Yeah, good question. So I'm going to try and do it in like two parts. Like, what motivates me? Honestly, this is going to sound like the nerdiest response ever, but like, I think of research as the fun stuff that I get to do when all my other stuff is done. So, like, when all my grading is done, like, Lindsay, you have to do your grading today because then tomorrow you can do research. And so I don't know how helpful that is to like people who don't really like doing research, but I really do. And like, I want to sit down and write about binge watching and FOMO. Like, I want to do those things. And so it's really finding the motivation to do all the other stuff that will get me to the point where I'm allowed to, you know, write. So yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
how helpful that is, but
No, no, no. That is helpful. And you've just described the nerd that is me. Because it's like, oh, if I'm sitting down with SPSS, I'm sort of in a happy place. But if I'm doing
exactly. I'm
other
like
things,
totally lost. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to split the variable this way. I'm going to look and see if this happened. Yeah, I love it. And so I have to like, by doing all my other work and sitting through my committee meetings and teaching, like, that's the stuff that I have to do to get to where, like, oh my gosh, today I'm caught up. So today I can, and I do this bad thing where I binge watch and then write about binge watching at the same time. So, like, yes, all my work is done. So today I'm putting on Downton Abbey all day and I'm writing about binge watching. So, yeah.
And I mean, as you mentioned, I think that it takes some longer than others to find what you're passionate about. And
hmm
Yes.
hmm
everyone has some sort of research passion. It's just
Yeah.
finding.
Yes. Yeah, I
So
totally agree.
as we think about the future of the discipline and kind of your research trajectory, what is something that you are looking forward to or that excites you?
Oh, going back to conferences in real life would excite me. Um, what excites me? I don't know. Like, my specific research changes so fast that by the time something is published, it's already outdated. So,
Oh,
like, I am already have been on that treadmill for years now of, okay, I already have to be thinking of the next thing. Like, what is the next thing? Because it's already happening, binge watching is already over. So I need to think of the next thing. So yeah,
hmm
I don't know. What am I excited about? Ooh, I don't know. It hasn't happened yet. I guess understanding, um, I think myself and my co-author have been talking about doing a study about streaming services that are releasing their shows week by week.
mm,
Like, kind of, okay, they're over the release it all at once model. Now they're going back to the week by week. Like, Ted
Right.
Lasso was getting
yeah.
released week by week.
Yes.
So they're like killing the binge watching, even though they're a streaming service. So I think that's kind of what we're going to look at next, is like the week by week release, even though you don't have to, kind of thing. Why? And what is this doing this to audiences?
Well, what I wonder about that scenario, and I've done this with Apple Plus. The morning show is being released
Yes.
every Friday,
Yeah.
and so I kind of like save shows until they've all dropped.
Oh, totally. I do
So
too.
I
I
can
do the
binge
same
watch.
thing, which I think that's where my next, stuff is gonna go is like, I don't wanna watch week by week. I wanna binge watch it. So I will save it up until I've got like bingeable amounts
Yep.
of a show. Yeah.
Yep.
I love it. So you had mentioned what you're looking forward to is academic conferences. So here's our rapid fire finish question. Is there a specific conference you're looking forward to attending in person?
Yeah, I mean, AEJMC is my main conference. I'm so mad that we missed San Francisco and New Orleans, and
No
like
kidding.
our next hope is Detroit. And so,
Right,
okay,
right.
like that's the only thing that'll make me super hyped for Detroit is, being online for 2 years. So, yeah, AEJMC is my main conference, and that's what I'm looking forward to going back to.
Awesome. Lindsay, it has been a true pleasure to be able to catch up with you today. Thank you so much for making the time to join us for this Revise and Resubmit podcast.
You are so welcome. I was so happy to be here today and talk about research.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Bye.